Welcome to Buildings and Beyond,
a podcast that explores how we can create a more sustainable built environment
by focusing on efficiency, accessibility, and health.
I'm Robb Aldrich.
And I'm Kelly Westby.
This week I talked with John Balfe from NEEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. And John works a lot with school buildings, high-performance schools. There's an organization called CHIPS, C-H-P-S, Collaborative for High Performance Schools, which offers guidance and also certification for schools all over the country. And NEEP, John's organization, manages the Northeast regional version of CHIPS for folks in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. I do want to say that the website, CHIPS, chps.net, is the proper website. A couple times in the episode, I think I say chps.org. That is incorrect. So it's all correct in the show notes. So here's an interview with John Balfe. All right. High performance schools. First of all, did you go to a high performance school?
I did not. Well, my high school was decent. It wasn't built to any criteria. My old elementary school recently got knocked down and renovated, and it is now a high-performance school. It's a CHIP school, so it was kind of cool to see, and I actually went back and did a case study on it, so that was kind of cool.
Oh, cool. Where was it?
It's in Middleton, Massachusetts.
All right. Cool.
So, yeah, it was a lot better than when I went there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking back, when we were kind of prepping for this call, I was thinking back on my school, and it was, I think it was built in the 50s or something. It was before I was born. And it was the one thing I remember when I was thinking about it was just the heat. If you go back to school in September, you can get a heat wave in September.
Right.
This was also in Massachusetts, and I remember just being stifling in classrooms.
Oh, so uncomfortable.
That's
not a good place to learn.
Exactly. So when we're talking about high performance schools, the first thing that comes to mind for me is kind of indoor air quality. Is that a big pillar of CHIPS, of these programs?
Yeah, I think indoor air quality, and we kind of even broadened it a little bit further than that to the indoor environmental quality. So things like acoustics, air quality, thermal comfort of the building are kind of the key components of indoor environmental quality. All really important because if a student's sitting in the back of a class and the HVAC equipment comes on and is really loud and distracting, that kid in the back of the class might not be hearing what the teacher is saying, and that can be really difficult. Not a great learning environment. So kind of the other two pillars. I like to always say that there's three main pillars: energy efficiency, in environmental stewardship, really. So, it's an energy efficient building and reduces the impact on the environment around us. So to me, those are the big three things that high performance schools have in common.
Gotcha. Efficiency, indoor environmental quality, not just indoor air quality, and environmental impact. Locally and globally, thinking small and big. Yeah,
I think, as much as possible, and in the CHIPS criteria, there's, you can get points for locally sourced materials and, citing your school building in a proper way. But, I think it's has a local impact for sure, but, I think we're all in this together, so it's, kind of a global impact as well.
Awesome. And there are plenty of high performance building programs, green building programs. What is different? CHIPS is very specific to schools. What are the big challenges, or what's different about schools that CHIPS addresses?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. CHIPS is designed just for schools. It was LEED has a few different building types that it works in, and really is focused on kind of community-wide stuff, which is super important. But schools were the focus of CHIPS from the beginning, and Northeast CHIPS, which is the criteria that I'll probably be referencing throughout the talk today. But that was built with input from a lot of regional stakeholders here in the Northeast region, facility directors, school business officials, architects and engineers. So it was really, a collaborative effort to build this criteria with, what's really important here in the Northeast. So, I think there's regional adaptations of the CHIPS criteria, Northeast CHIPS being one of them. So I think that's, a little bit different of a twist from maybe some other criterias that are out there. And what's different about schools, I think we all know how important schools are. It could be the reason that folks move to a town if there's a really good school system. We often say that they're the center of the community, and I think that's so true now more than ever with some of the resiliency discussions coming into play. They're being used as community centers more and more. And so often we're seeing a new school being built, and that school is being used for many other things besides just kind of the educational component of it. Obviously that's the main focus, but there's stuff going on during the summer at the schools. Maybe there's stuff going on in the morning before school, or afternoon activities, whether that's sports or camps or feeding the hungry in that community. We're seeing that happen a lot. So I think that's kind of what's different about schools. They're just the center of the community, and they're used for a lot more than education. And I actually wrote a blog on this not too long ago that highlighted that students spend over, I think it was like over 15,000, maybe close to 16,000 hours over their life in a school building. So it's a place where students are just spending a ton of time, and having an important focus in these environments. I think just makes good sense, and over the long run can save the community a lot of money if we're focusing on high performance.
No arguments. So interesting. So like you can have a lead restaurant. A restaurant is used as a restaurant all the time. But whereas schools are like you said, they're going to be used during the school day, and then after hours, other town groups coming in, often town meetings, elections, the weekends. You have all kinds of different stuff going on, and the CHIPS criteria has specific methods or credits to kind of encourage you to address these different uses. Did I hear you correctly there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are a few different ways that either the community gets involved in the upfront design of the school building, but there's also particular credits in Northeast CHIPS and probably all the other adaptations of CHIPS as well that give you points for joint use of facilities, I think is what it's called in Northeast CHIPS. So, having plans in place to allow for the greater community to either, rent out the different spaces, whether that's the auditorium, the cafeteria, just a particular classroom, or, some of the fields out in the athletic yard. So there's different, plans that you can have in place to make these kind of, transactions, or these, allowing the community to use them, pretty easily. And for some schools may charge community for those uses. Some may not. It might depend on if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit. They might, charge different rates there. But, we're also seeing it's a great way for some schools, if they are charging, to, get a little bit extra money that way. So it's something I don't think everyone thinks about when they're, building a school, but, it's something the community is really invested in and kind of wants to show off the school. And, this is one of the great things about CHIPS, is kind of gets you thinking about, how your school can be used by others as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's something that I hadn't thought about discreetly, not in that way.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge because you don't necessarily factor in that the school is going to be used a lot more than, just regular school hours. So, things like energy modeling and, just taking that into account is really important, so that you can, have accurate models and really try to understand, how much the school will actually be used. So cool. It's things like that we're trying to share those stories with folks that are going through the process and make sure that they're, aware of it if that's kind of the route they want to go down.
And how about are there new technologies or systems or maybe not new, but stuff you're seeing more and more. I mean, personally, I see lots more PV on schools everywhere. Kind of a great high visibility place for solar, and a tool to teach kids about solar. But are there kind of different lighting technologies or ventilation approaches, or are there any kind of new technological trends you guys see in CHIPS schools?
Yeah, I think definitely, we're seeing a lot of renewable energies, probably solar being the biggest one in schools. And like you said, it's, definitely an opportunity to kind of teach students about what renewable energies are, but also on the energy efficiency side of things, there are ways to kind of integrate that into the curriculum as well. So in a lot of the schools I've toured and just been in, I guess, over the past couple of years, LED lights are obviously very common. Controlling of those lights, it's some schools will have some really good daylighting features. So there'll be sensors in classrooms that will dim the lights automatically when enough sunlight is being introduced into that room. And conversely, if there's not enough natural daylight coming in, then the lights will brighten. So it's kind of smart control, smart building type features that we're seeing in a lot of other building types are now going into schools too, which is pretty cool.
Maybe related, let me stop you for a second, but are there actually credits in the CHIPS programs for kind of incorporating high performance features as part of the curriculum for students? Is that strongly encouraged?
Yes, there is a whole section, and we often reference it or talk about it as kind of using the school as a teaching tool.
Cool.
But yeah, integrating that into the curriculum, it gets you some extra credits in CHIPS, and there are a lot of good other organizations that kind of focus specifically on getting the working the building into the curriculum. So there are a lot of good like case studies and things that you can follow out there. But yeah, it's certainly built into the CHIPS criteria as well.
Nice. That's very cool.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of just engage and educate students. I've been in a few schools where the design team will really like accentuate or highlight the HVAC equipment in a building, like the ducts and things like that. They'll really try to paint them, unique colors and bright and vibrant, so that it kind of piques the interest of students, and then maybe gets them asking questions about that, and getting that conversation started. So that's pretty cool, and it just makes for kind of a nice environment with those types of colors. But that's kind of one unique way I've seen. Another technology that I've seen in a couple of schools now are these, with technology just changing so much, textbooks aren't as prevalent in schools, and libraries are a little bit different than they used to be. When I went to school, we were seeing a lot of students with iPads or laptops, owned by the school district potentially. So one thing that I've seen a couple times are laptop carts, or device carts that are used for charging the equipment at the end of the day, or whenever it runs out of battery life. But basically, these laptops or iPads or whatever they might be are stored in a closet, and there's a supply, electric supply to the cart, and once all the iPads are done charging, the electricity just kind of shuts off there. So it's not, you're not plugging in individual iPads or laptops in classrooms, all over the place in the school anymore, which is nice to see. And you're not seeing kind of those phantom loads that are, maybe just draining a small amount of energy throughout the night. But collectively, with all the iPads and all the laptops over the course of a year, that can amount to a lot of energy. So things like these laptop carts are pretty cool that we're seeing that kind of help to navigate that issue, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting. I was at a meeting recently. This is related to schools, but they recently reset the benchmarks for commercial buildings for Energy Star through the portfolio manager tool. So the benchmark for schools, one of the big challenges was computers from the last time they set the benchmark. I don't know if it was 6 years ago or 10 years ago. But, they used to have this energy allotment for computers in schools. And, school might have a few dozen computers. Now they have hundreds and hundreds of computers. They're much more efficient, but they're so much more prevalent. It's an interesting challenge, just an interesting just exercise to see how these energy usage patterns change. It's fun.
Yeah, I think plug loads, just in general, are through the roof in a lot of these types of facilities. People plugging in and charging their devices. Maybe that happens less so in schools, but laptops and iPads for sure. That's huge in schools. And then whatever the teachers might be bringing into the school as well. As far as coffee pots or mini fridges, those sorts of things. So managing all that, I think with some of the technology we have today is probably a lot easier than it was. And one other last kind of technology that I'm seeing a lot, and this is more on the student educational side of things, I think are like building energy dashboards.
Cool.
So, a big monitor right when you come in the school or in a kind of high visibility place that, gets students interested in how much energy, maybe it only impacts a few students here and there, but I think, it gets people thinking about how much energy they're using, and, sometimes those can display, tips for reducing energy. So, we're seeing that a lot pop up in a lot of building types, but especially schools where, there's that educational component as well.
Excellent. So the programs themselves, I know you can go online to the CHIPS website, chps.org, and you can sign up for a free account and download all the info. Does NEEP have a similar website for the Northeast CHIPS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we neep.org is our website, and we have a ton of good resources and case studies on high performance schools, and that's where actually the Northeast CHIPS criteria lives. So it's pretty easy to navigate if you go to our schools page. And all our resources are free to use, and they are meant for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. So we work everywhere in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, down to DC, Delaware, and West Virginia now as well. So they're specific to those states.
So that all that info is there and free to use. If somebody wants to go through the process of certification, how does that work? And who is it that actually decides to sign up? Is it the designer? Is it the school board? How does the process work for getting certified? Briefly.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it can be a bit of a it'll depend, I guess, on the state and the community. Who actually kind of pushes for CHIPS. Sometimes we'll see a school board member will be really familiar with Northeast CHIPS, and they'll want to really push for that. Sometimes it's the architect or the engineer bringing it to the community, saying that these things are achievable, and we should be looking at that. Usually it's the architect or the design team, I guess I should say, kind of going through the process and doing all the paperwork and making sure that the credits line up and that sort of thing, and submitting documentation. But it really can depend on who's pushing for it. We always try to get some language in the RFPs when a community is going out to bid for a school project. We try to get language in there about targeting a low energy building or specifically Northeast CHIPS. So it can definitely depend on just kind of where the process is taking place. On kind of the CHIPS side of things, it again will depend on the state, because in Rhode Island they do in-house reviews of all the documentation that comes in. So they actually they have the school building authority there in Rhode Island that reviews all the forms that were filled out, and then they're the ones that actually say that yes, you met the CHIPS criteria, or no, you didn't because of these reasons, and this is what you can do next. In other states, it's submitted directly to CHIPS, the organization itself, and they have reviewers on staff that go through all this paperwork and figure out whether you met the criteria or not. So kind of depends. There are different rules in different states, I guess.
Earlier is better in any kind of design process to make sure you get details right, I'm sure. You don't want to be ready to start construction and then, hey, let's make this high performance. or I'm sure that this is even more the case for schools than some other buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these projects sometimes take years and years. So the earlier you can get in, and the more planning you can get done, and just kind of the more information that you can gather as a community or as a design team on how to accomplish these goals. The earlier the better for sure. We try to tell that to all our communities, and a big piece of this is engaging with your local utilities, and that's actually one of the prerequisites in Northeast CHIPS is making sure you're working with utilities and getting the technical assistance and the financial incentives that that they might have available to you. So that, of course, has to happen early on as well. So we're always trying to push for schools to think about these things early and get the process started as soon as they can.
So what's the result? I mean, we mentioned earlier that good indoor environmental quality is great. It makes sense to want that in schools. But are there kind of meaningful studies that show that, hey, kids learn better, they actually do better? Have people looked into that?
Yeah, there are definitely a bunch of good studies out there. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence from maybe one particular school that's seen reduced absentee rates since they opened up a high performance school. And one example I can share is the Concord School District in New Hampshire. They actually saw a pretty significant absentee rate reduction. And they opened up a few new high performance schools back in between 2010 and 2013, somewhere in that range, and they saw those reductions. So there's a lot of things like that, but there are definitely some more kind of scientific, formal studies out there. The Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health is doing a lot of great work in this area right now. They have a couple of publications out there already that talk about really in-depthly how the indoor environment impacts student thinking and health, and test scores. So there's certainly a lot of good information out there. The EPA actually has a lot of good resources on this as well. I think they have a whole webpage kind of dedicated to high performance schools. I'm not sure the exact title of that webpage, but EPA and schools kind of gets you to
cool.
All that information.
We can dig it up and we'll put it on the show notes page, as well as the link to the Harvard studies you said. And do you have kind of cool case studies?
Yeah, we have a number of them on our websites. I've done a bunch in the past few years, but yeah, we're always looking to add to them too. So if you are ever working on a high performance school and want to create a case study, I'm happy to work with whoever on that as well.
Cool. How about existing schools? I mean, everything we've been talking about new construction so far, but does CHIPS or NEEP get into programs, methods to improve existing schools?
Yeah, so you can use Northeast CHIPS for new construction, for major renovation projects, or kind of in a phased approach. So if you're just kind of doing, capital improvement projects here and there, over time you can actually become CHIPS verified. But the existing stock is obviously much larger than new construction buildings. So it's a super important thing to be targeting. On the NEEP side of things, we do a lot of work with facility directors. We have a lot of strong connections with facility directors throughout the region, and we're trying to help them understand, what they can be doing to improve the efficiency of their buildings. We have this guide called the Regional Operations and Maintenance Guide for public buildings. So it goes beyond schools, but a lot of it is targeted directly at schools, and provides a lot of best practices and lessons learned and kind of checklists. It's a user-friendly guide to help facility directors or others within a community really improve the efficiency of their existing building stock. So yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do kind of as a industry whole on existing buildings if we want to really improve the some of the carbon emissions and the our talk about climate change. If we want to really improve those things, targeting the existing building stock is so important.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
Yep.
It's a big deal, and that's a frustration. I mean, we work with a lot of designers, developers of new buildings, and they're much, 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 much better. And this is Everybody's scratching their heads about, all right, what do we do with the 99% of buildings out there that are old?
Exactly. And one of
get there.
the things that we always say, you gotta start with understanding your building's energy use. So going through the benchmarking process, using that portfolio manager tool that you mentioned earlier, that's really kind of where you got to start. You got to take control. It's just like, if you're trying to get control of your finances in your personal life, you kind of budget things out. And that's kind of how I see, looking at improving the energy in existing buildings. You gotta dive into it and try to figure out how much energy you're using and where there's some room for improvement. So that's really the key first step to me.
Yep, fantastic point. Absolutely, I definitely agree. So what's next? Where, if we talk about this in 5 years, 10 years, any trends? You think there are some big changes happening? What are high performance schools going to look like, or the programs going to look like down the road?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was listening to some of the earlier podcasts that you guys have produced, and your talk about zero energy buildings, and to me, I think that's a really big one that's being talked about really all over in kind of small pockets of the region. These conversations are definitely happening, and depending on who you're talking to, you'll get varying levels of, oh yeah, that's definitely possible at a similar budget to a regular or high performance building. Others are a lot more skeptical and think that it costs a lot more. So I think there's certain trade-offs specific to each project that can make projects a lot more if you're targeting zero energy. But to me, the important thing is really targeting a low EUI building. So just making sure that the building is conserving energy and using energy as efficiently as possible, and then tying in some of those renewable energy components into it as well. So yeah, we're NEEP is having these conversations across the region. I'm involved in conversations in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. So really, it's happening all over. There's a couple of good examples down in Maryland. They had a zero energy kind of pilot program where they selected 3 schools with some state funding there to get to zero energy. So I think there's one school open now that's, I'm not sure if it's exactly at zero energy, but I would imagine it's pretty close if it's not truly zero energy. So and there's 2 more kind of coming online later this year. So, we're seeing more and more of these buildings pop up, and I think schools are on the leading edge of this kind of zero energy movement. So it's really good to see, and hopefully, with education kind of all around across the market, we'll be able to make this possible, more possible over the next 5 to 10 years for new construction at least.
Awesome. Yeah, schools that may be a hot topic with zero energy buildings because they're high visibility. People want high performance schools for all the reasons that we've been talking about. And they're often fairly large, low-rise buildings with lots of roof area for solar. So yeah, I think it could be a winning combination. We'll stay tuned for more zero energy schools.
I hope so.
So thanks, John. Where do people go? I think we mentioned chps.org is the CHIPS website, and
yeah, I think it's actually chps.net, but that's
good.
No big deal. You'd probably get there either way if you Googled it.
Thank you for the correction. We'll put the right link on our website, and NEEP is .org, right? Is that right?
Yep, neep.org. You got that right.
Cool.
And I guess I'll just throw a plug for one of our tools that really helps communities kind of figure out what they should be taking on. It's a tool we released early last year, and it's kind of a user-friendly guide for anyone in the community to walk through and point to specific projects that they should be taking on. So it's called CAPE, Community Action Planning for Energy Efficiency. So if you're listening and trying to figure out where your community should be kind of thinking about energy efficiency and what to take on first, from forming an energy committee to building a high performance school, there's all this information built into this this cool new tool. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a good starting point for a lot of folks if they're overwhelmed with the mass amount of information that's out there.
Oh, cool. That sounds like it could be a great resource. And that's on the NEEP website, and you can get to it from the NEEP website.
Yep, that's correct. That's on neep.org.
And we'll link to that directly in the show notes too.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, John.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Buildings and Beyond. For more information about the topics discussed today, visit www.swinter.com/podcast and check out the episode's show notes. Buildings and Beyond is brought to you by Stephen Winter Associates. We provide energy, green building, and accessibility consulting services to improve the built environment. Our professionals have led the way since 1972 in the development of best practices to achieve high-performance buildings. Our production team for today's episode includes Dylan Martello, Alex Mirable, and myself, Heather Breslin. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.